Thank you so much. I like you as well. I love all that you're doing. I just say thank you so much to PCP Wales, because you are fighting cultural Marxism at the front, where it's trying to take over our nation and introduce things which we should never have in our country here in this century and in this decade. And we all have to stand up against that, and you are doing that. So we talk a lot about wokery, we talk a lot about political correctness, and I think everyone somehow on some level realizes that there's a lot that is not right with our society. There's a general sense of unease that we have today that if you grew up in the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, you didn't have, because everything was just left alone. But there are ideologies now and forces at work which are trying to undermine and corrode everything in our society which is good, and to invert all of our values, so that what is good is, we're told that it's bad, and things that are bad, we're told that it's good, and they need to be propagated and they need to be inculcated in every institution, in every area of our society, whatever it is. Particularly in education, because that's one of the first areas of society to be totally infiltrated by cultural Marxist ideology. But what is this cultural Marxism? Well, I was asked that on GB News the other day. I was asked, what is wokery? Because I use that word woke a lot. We all do these days because it's an easy word to use. But it's essentially cultural Marxism. It's a series of narratives that says that society is inherently homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic, racist, Islamophobic, and whatever. And because of that, we need to change everything around in order to create equality and get rid of oppression. But it's complete nonsense, because our society is good as it is. We don't need to change anything, and we don't need to bring in these new teachings which are coming into our schools, in our universities, and so on. It started with universities when in the 60s you would have had a lot of new subjects being created and introduced, like gender studies and race studies and so on, in order to criticize through critical theory the values that we had. So we're told that there's not 2 biological sexes anymore, there's 100 different genders, and you can change your gender on any day of the week according to how you feel. So you can be a man on Monday, a woman on Tuesday, a smiley unicorn on Wednesday, and a demi-dwarf on Thursday, and heaven knows what you are on a Friday. And that's the kind of nonsense that people get taught in universities, and it's coming down into schools as well. And they're actually taught this kind of stuff in science classes, as though this is scientific truth, when it's absolute nonsense. So we need to just stand up for what is just normal, common biological sense. I say that as a former science teacher. I used to teach reproduction in school to 12 or 13-year-old kids, which is absolutely fine, because that's just teaching people about science at an age which is appropriate. And the people pushing RSE, relationships and sex education, often talk about being age appropriate. But what they're doing is anything but age appropriate. It is grossly age inappropriate. And in some cases, it is degenerate and disgusting. And thank you all for coming out here and standing up against it, because we need to push back on this and make sure that it doesn't affect more generations of children than it's already affected already. Because I know in England, they passed the Children and Social Care Act in 2017, and that made relationships and sex education compulsory in schools in England in 2017. Now, I think in Wales it was 2022, was it? The law was passed or something, 2020. January 2022, they passed a similar law in Wales, which goes way beyond what we even have in England. And in Scotland, they've done something similar as well. So now we have sexuality being taught to 3- and 4-year-old kids, and every age upwards. and it involves teaching children. I'm going to modify my language here, but they teach children things about touching themselves, which should never be taught to kids. Why does anybody need to teach this to any kids, whether they're in secondary school or primary school or kindergarten? It's so wrong. And it's almost unbelievable that you have politicians in the Welsh Senedd pushing this onto kids, in Holyrood pushing it, in the Parliament there pushing it. Shame on them. Nobody in their right mind would push this kind of stuff on children. We should just let kids be kids. So I say to the politicians in the Senedd, in any other body where there are politicians and MPs, take your hands off our kids and leave them alone to be innocent and be brought up and to have their childhood, and to allow parents to be the prime educators of their children, which is the rightful order of society. They're trying to take away parents' rights to bring up their children as they see fit. And what parent would sexualize their children when they're 3 or 4 year olds? No one. How can politicians, who some of them are parents themselves, want to implement this stuff in schools? So we have to stand up against it. I'm standing up in the area of politics, obviously, with the Heritage Party. And what our policy is that relationships and sex education should no longer be taught in any school anywhere in this United Kingdom. As well as education being totally infiltrated and captured, politics has been infiltrated and captured as well, including all of the major political parties, which is why you have what I call the fake Conservatives pushing it in England, Labour pushing it in Wales, the SNP pushing it in Scotland, and the Lib Dems and Greens, well, they support it as well. We want them out. So I know I can only speak for myself. In the Heritage Party, we're standing against this, and we want to challenge as many MPs as we possibly can in the next general election, so that we can have people in that building over there to say this stops in our country right now. But we have PCP Wales who are taking action in the legal realm and bringing this very, very important court case in Wales. And I don't normally support legal cases, but what they're doing is worthy of support. So I will give a little bit of money to them myself later on. And, you know, if you want to do that as well, you know, God bless you.
God bless you.
I normally only raise money for the Heritage Party, but they are well worth what they're doing, because what they're doing goes absolutely 100% along with what we stand for as a party, what you all stand for here, and what all the other speakers who are here stand for as well. So thank you all for turning up, and let's take our country back.